All right, you guys, welcome back to another episode of The Common Theory. And of course, as always, I'm your host, Chris, along with my man, Dallas.
Hey,
And today we have a very fun topic. And I think this topic is very dear to my man, Dallas's heart. We are going to be talking about combo, and not just combo, we're going to be talking about why combo decks are thriving in the format. We're going to be talking about why these decks are performing as they're performing in the meta and kind of why certain decks are above the others in the format. And if I could throw a little 2 cents out there, Dallas, do you mind if I throw this
oh,
out
go
there?
for it. We're all for the spicy takes.
We we're going to be kind of speaking about a very controversial topic midway through here. I'm not going to throw too much out there at you guys because, of course, you got to watch the whole video, right? So, we're going to kind of attempt to settle a debate that has been happening far too often right now. And we're going to kind of do a compare and contrast and see what we come up with. So, I think you guys are going to love it. And yeah, let's hit us, man. Let's start us off and let's take it away.
Yeah. So, once again, similar to our last video talking about aggro, the first thing we need to establish is what makes a combo deck function in this format. And for this, we have just a couple things that are very broad scoped. We have redundancy and consistency. You want to talk a little bit about what those might mean, especially in the context of your Abdel Sword Coast Sailor deck that we have pulled up here?
Of course, of course. So, with that said, of course, there's other aspects that make combo decks what they are, right? But we're going to be talking about both of these because they intertwine with one another, right? And so, for instance, we're just going to hit on Abdel and Abdel Blue, of course. And let's just go right in to the
Actually,
nitty gritty, right?
I
And we
suppose
could,
before we go into this, we should even define what a combo deck is, what it does. That seems
true,
like a
true.
good thing to define.
Yes, definitely, definitely, my bro. Take it away, take it away.
um,
Hit us with it.
so, combo decks in our format are looking for a combination of cards, hence the name, that are going to end the game, preferably as soon as you get the combination into play. So things like infinite mana and then dealing X amount of damage, where X is the mana you put into a spell, Just actually pay 100 million into X and destroy every player at the table. Things like that. So we're looking for a few key cards that are just going to win us the game on the spot, and then the rest of the deck is built to support that game plan in some way, and there are many different ways to do that. So,
Definitely, definitely.
but yeah, go ahead and continue.
Yes, definitely. So back to what we were saying. Let's kind of touch upon the redundancy factor. And as once again as Abdel Blue as the example, we're gonna just touch upon certain aspects of the deck, and we're gonna start with the Archaeomancer effects. So of course, the standard one is Archaeomancer himself. And when we look at Archaeomancer, we're going to look at what other components allow the deck to do what the deck is trying to do. So we have a few, I like to call them as a joke, build your own Archaeomancers, right? So, of course, Archaeomancer is the most efficient, being 4 mana, doing what it's doing at its cost. But then we have Melweb Curator. Then we have Respiratory Scab. And then we have Monodic Wall and Salvager and Shipwreck Dowser. Like, we have so many of these effects. Now, the average person, and including me, went back once upon a time when I used to look at cards like this, like Respiratory Scab. It's like, well, I need to jump through all of these hoops to make this happen. But do you really? So on paper, when you look at these kinds of cards, and my favorite example is the Wormfang Newt, which I think it's kind of been picked up here a little bit more than it used to be. But just for reference, just for the individuals that are listening on Spotify and whatnot, I'll read out the Wormfang Newt because that is like the one card that most people don't actually know. And it is a one colorless and a blue 2/2 Nightmare Salamander Beast. Quite a strange creature. And when Wormfang Newt comes into play, remove a land you control from the game. Notably, does not target. And as well, when Wormfang Newt leaves the battlefield, return the removed card to play under its owner's control. So cards like this are like make your own Arcane Signet, make your own Archaeomancer. And the reason I say Signet or Archaeomancer is with this Newt, you're able to treat it such as Meldweb Curator, to where, yes, the card goes on top of the library. Oh, wait, forgot a key piece. Mystic Sanctuary. Now this is going to start making sense to you guys. You will completely understand why now all of these cards are kind of melding together and all of the logic is building upon itself, right? So the Newt now allows you to go infinite just as if it was an Archaeomancer. What do you think about that puzzle? Like,
So not necessarily. You still have to have an effect in play that draws a card on ETB so that you can get your flicker spell back. But yeah, effectively, if you have this and Mystic Sanctuary and the flicker piece and the ETB draw card and the mana being net off Abdel, this goes infinite. And that sounds like a lot, right? But
it does sound like a lot.
one thing that this deck has is absurd amounts of redundancy to be able to kind of counteract that.
Well, speaking of the redundancy, going right back, right, of how many cards I've already named, which is just a disgusting mouthful at this point. If we continue looking at it, right, which is very similar to Gretchen, just as a little tidbit out there, but we have our blink spells for Abdel, right? And I mean, there's just so many. I'm not going to go in depth and name all of them, but then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I know. I could keep counting. It's disgusting. And some of them, like Momentary Blink, have flashback, right? And these blink spells are just here for consistency factors. We just have so many. The deck is just so redundant at doing what it does. And I've seen lines with certain players play this to where they end up to combo off, they end up generous gifting their own Abdel, which is like almost an absurd thing to think about. But sometimes you need a way to get your Abdel off the table to unlock your Archaeomancer effect, to be able to bring back a blink effect and start the process, right? So you run into these weird lines with decks like these that are just so consistent and they just use these awkward lines. And one thing I've loved to say about like a deck like yours, Puzzle, Gretchen specifically, is back in the day I saw you do some wild things with a rewind to net yourself mana. And it's similar to like generous gifting your own Abdel, right? You end up rewinding your own spell to continue the process and move forward and move forward. And it isn't the norm. But because it's not the norm, it really makes these styles of decks a little complicated, right? But they reward you for learning them and memorizing play patterns and memorizing lines and memorizing how the math is. And what I mean by the math, which I think you'll appreciate this specifically, is knowing how many redundant pieces you have and knowing how consistently you could draw those off the top. What do you think about that?
Of drawing what piece of your combo you have in your deck is really crucial to piloting these decks effectively, I would say. Um, just knowing, like, it's also crucial for mulligans, right? Like, if I
Yep.
mulligan and I get 3 of one side of my combo, like, yeah, that sucks, but that does mean that my odds of drawing the other pieces are higher just because, I don't have one half of my combo in my deck anymore. But additionally, that allows you to be able to just throw one out early if you're a deck like Abdel, where you just kind of combo by having your pieces in play. If I draw 2 Archaeomancers or 3 Archaeomancer effects, I can throw one out early as a value piece and then kind of gauge where the interaction is at the table and still set up for my combo if there is no interaction. So
Yep.
a lot of
Exactly.
that redundancy really helps you to just kind of play into interaction, which is really nice.
Yeah, it kind of allows you to push through, right? That's kind of a weird way to put it. It allows you to attempt to win and kind of test the waters, essentially. And then if they stop you, you were okay with this. But if they don't, you accidentally won the game. Like how, like, it's pretty awkward, right?
Yeah, for sure. Um,
So, oh, continue, continue.
I was just gonna say, you got any notes on consistency for your deck as opposed to redundancy, if we want to differentiate them?
Yes, definitely. So, you actually brought up an important factor about a deck like this. So, the deck is made to do one thing. It is a combo deck at heart, and the consistency factor is actually built into the mulligans. So, a way you learn a deck, for instance, like Abdel, is you learn how fast you could win. So, you essentially draw your hand and see how fast you can present a win without being interacted. And the deck, on average, can present a win by turn 6 every game. So out of 25 games, I did a few little tests and things of that nature to where out of 25 games, 22 of the 25 games, I was able to present win by turn 6. And this was including with mulligans. So some of those games, I even mulliganed down to 4 cards and was still able to present win by turn 6. So this allows you to learn the consistency factor of how many cards you have and why they're doing what they're doing. And it allows you to understand the difference between cards like Cloud Shift and Ephemerate, right? Because those two cards look very similar on the surface, but you lose that consistency factor because Ephemerate is there for like mid-range purposes, not for combo purposes, because it can't do that, right? Exactly. So, but with that, I don't really have much else to talk about. I know we've kind of beaten on these several decks here quite a bit, and I don't want to go too long in the tooth with Abdel because I think we've done a good job speaking about it here in the past and whatnot. But I definitely would like to move on to our next deck, which I think is one near to your heart.
Could say that. So yeah, next up we've got Gretchen. I know you guys are tired of hearing of it, but I don't care. Uh,
I
so
mean, you have to learn these two decks, right? Like, I don't mean to interrupt you, but like we've said it how many times at this point, and Gretchen is just in every top at this point, and it's just there, right? You need to know how to play against this deck. So,
yeah, so if you don't know what Gretchen does, the goal is to put a creature into play that can untap lands, get a land that taps for 2 or more mana, or however much mana you need for whatever instance of untapping you have, which there are 3 of in the deck. I don't know why Aboro Breeze color isn't over there on this, but oh, it's under the land untapper list, but we'll just put it under here because it's technically this too. So there's 3 ways to untap lands. Each has a different requirement to go infinite, but essentially we make infinite mana, draw a card with our commander by paying mana, so we can draw through our deck, and then we win the game through a myriad of ways with cards that are just good cards in general, but also happen to be win conditions like Sapphire Charm and Capsize, things of that nature. So, one major thing that Gretchen has going for it is there is a lot of redundancy for this gameplay. Currently, my main list is on 10 land enchantments that make lands tap for additional mana, and 13 land untappers. There are more land enchantments. There's 2 or 3 additional ones that I'm not playing that you could play if you want to even out those numbers. And honestly, I might consider switching out a land untapper for a land enchantment, just to even out those numbers a bit. But the land untappers tend to be a bit more important because there's other ways for the deck to get additional mana with lands through cards like High Tide or the Bounce Land, things of that nature. So that's one major thing speaking to the redundancy. And as for consistency, the way that this deck really achieves this is through the fact that all of our combo pieces are also just ramp. So overall, this deck is on 26 pieces of ramp, which is just an absurd amount. 26 pieces of ramp, 34 lands, so that's a combined 60 cards dedicated to mana. And our commander is a mana outlet. So by having all of this mana, at the very least, we have access to card draw and ramp in the command zone, which is just good stuff, and we'll get there eventually.
So something I wanted to bring up, because you're bringing up like fantastic points about this deck. I kind of want you to touch upon how this deck mulligans, because I think decks like these 2 decks, with like Abdel being able to mulligan to 4 and still being able to consistently win on turn 6, right? How does this deck mulligan? Because I know you've done it quite a bit, and ironically enough, I do know how well it does on its mulligans, but I think it's better coming straight from you. How does it mulligan on 4 and 5 cards?
That is true. So, like any deck, obviously, we would love to just have 7 cards in our hand that are good. But part of playing combo decks is the fact that you have to give up some card quality so that you can have your combo pieces and interaction to protect your combo pieces. Or just win faster through ramp, really fast ramp, or extra combo pieces. So, what Gretchen does really well about mulliganing is that Gretchen's combo pieces are still ramped. So realistically, whenever we're mulliganing, we are pretty okay to just look for 1 or 2 lands, depending on the hand, maybe 3 if we have to, 1 land untapper, and 1 land enchantment. And at that point, we're pretty much set up to play our game. We can play the mid-range, draw cards, and interact with people until we just fall into one of our untappers, which we have multiple of, as well as multiple ways to tutor them. So this deck mulligans really well because we have so much redundancy, and our game plan is so simple that we can just go, alright, turn 1 land, turn 2 land into a land enchantment or land untapper, which ramps us to guarantee that we can play our turn 3 combo piece, and then we just...
Are you saying it's consistent?
It is
that what you're saying?
Very consistent. Yeah, I think this deck mulligans extremely well. And just because of the way mulligans work right now, where you draw 7 cards and get to pick what to put to the bottom, you just get to see so many cards that the odds of you not finding a hand with 2 lands and at least a land untapper or a land enchantment, if not both, like, the odds are very, very good for you to see those. So this deck mulligans very well.
Yep, definitely, definitely. But with that, do you have anything else to add before I bring up the big elephant in the room and kind of really hit home with some individuals here?
I think the one other thing that I want to just mention is that part of the reason I think Gretchen and Abdel are both very powerful is that unlike a majority of combo decks, these decks don't play very many cards that are just combo pieces, right? That are just like
Hmm.
mediocre cards that don't do anything outside of combo. Um, Abdel just plays ETBs that get value and mana rocks. Like, you're gonna play those anyways. Gretchen plays just ramp pieces. And, like, the only card that could be a dead card realistically is Abora Breeze Caller and Galvanic Alchemist. Even Freed from the Real can be used to tap down creatures if you absolutely have to. So Gretchen
Yep.
has effectively 2 always dead draws if you're not comboing. Um, and they're still creatures, so they're still blockers, you know?
Yep.
Unlike a couple cards in the next deck we're going to talk about. But,
Well, it's kind of funny you bring that up because I was actually explaining one of the combo lines because they were like, well, what happens with Abdel when Hereford's Chalice has been destroyed or exiled forever? And I was like, oh, I just generous gift them. And they're like, yeah, but then they could block. I'm like, yeah, and I echoing truth it, so I get a flawless victory. And they were like, wait, what did you just say? I was like, yeah, Mortal Kombat, generous gift. Your opponents have no board state. Echoing truth, it all gone. They're like, you could do that now in Pauper, and I'm like, yeah, generous gift was
I
downshifted.
mean, to be frank, if you're doing that mid combo, you could use literally any piece of removal and just do it infinitely. So it doesn't even
Oh
matter
yeah,
that it's echoing truth. But
for sure.
yeah,
But it's just fun to say,
it is
right?
very
It's
funny.
just fun to say,
um,
right? It reminds me of very many other lines from other decks and stuff like
yeah,
that.
and like
But
Gretchen at worst, if all your real win cons are gone, you just bounce the entire board state and you have infinite mana every turn and you punch people to death with your 1/1s, you know?
yep,
These
it
combo
works
decks
sometimes.
have some really bad win conditions that they could use if everything else is gone. So,
Yep, yep, yep. But let's move on. All right. So this is something. All right, puzzle. But let's do this. This is going to be something that I think everyone has been wanting to hear and wanting to talk about and wanting to know. And I'm going to start with my opinion before I even say what it even is. I think this is a bad comparison from the get go. Puzzle,
I
what are your
agree.
thoughts on it before we
I
even go there?
absolutely agree. I don't know why people chose to compare these decks. Um,
Yep. But
like,
now let's say what they are. Go for it.
yeah,
Hit them
I
with
mean,
it, and then
they
let's
could
go for
already
it.
see Tatiova on screen here. Um,
Okay.
so yeah, people like to compare Tatiova and Gretchen. I really don't know why they do this when Weavers have existed in the format basically as long as Tatiova, and people were like, how good is Gretchen versus Tatiova? And it's like, why are we not comparing Gretchen versus Weavers, the two freed from the real Simic combo decks with infinite mana outlets in the command zone? Um,
I
but
mean,
no,
I think Tatiova's a better comparison with Abdel. I mean, we're looking at
yeah,
two 5 mana
I mean,
commanders that are trying to pivot and do certain things, and yet where's the Weavers, right? Like
yeah,
this
people
is
really just see the
yeah.
colors and try to compare the decks, and that's just not a great comparison. But for the sake of everyone who's asking, we're gonna do it for you today, anyways.
Yes. we're gonna settle this argument because and we're not gonna give too much of our opinions here, you guys. We're gonna try to use actually more of the facts to really like show why certain one deck is, I don't want to say strictly better, but there's going to be certain reasonings and certain logics of why we can say that one can be better more than the other one.
We've already put our opinion out on these two decks. If you haven't seen the tier list, go check it out. We have stated our opinions on these decks already. So
Yep. But I mean, this will really back it up, right? And I mean, even before we even continue to go with this, right? Like Gretchen already has 2 wins under her belt. Tatiova has a top 4, right? So like we could already kind of say, maybe we could change the pilots and things like that. There's, we could go down this like long road of just ridiculousness, but why do we need to do that? Yeah, let's just look at the deck list and let's go from there. So let's hit this Tatiova.
Sure.
I already see the first problem in comparison. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 5 creatures that do the combo with what is it? What is the name of the card?
Tidal.
Tidal Bore.
1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Yep.
And 5. So we have 5. So in comparison to Gretchen with the Lana Tappers, we had, how many did you say? 13?
Yep, 13.
Well, so 13
technically
to 5.
12 because of Morobri's colors in there. So 12.
So we'll say 12. So 12
we'll
to
generous.
5. 12 to 5. All right. So, I mean, there's one overwhelming issue. How much do you care about Mystic Sanctuary?
Mystic Sanctuary is a good grind game plan for Gretchen, but it is by no means necessary for any but the absolute worst combo lines.
Mm-hmm. So we care a lot about Mystic Sanctuary in this deck, right? Because that is our Tidal Bore line. So we have to, and I don't know if this is the right word, and I might get, hated in the comment section for this statement, but we have to play some really bad cards like Shoreline Ranger and Tidal Terror to search for Mystic Sanctuary.
Okay, to be fair, I do not think these cards are that bad. I think Island Cycling is fine.
Is that being fair?
I'm much less of a fan of Expedition Map. I think that card is really not great.
Expedition Map finds any land,
but it costs 3 mana.
It finds any land.
It costs. We're playing Pauper EDH, dude.
Finds
every land we want is an island. Let's be honest. So
I have
Island
watched.
Cycling is way better than Expedition Map.
So this is why people enjoy listening to us, right? Are you ready for this? I have watched certain individuals play Gretchen on camera and only ever hit forests. And if you had an Expedition Map,
if I had a Tidal Terror, it would have done the same thing. Just
well, let's swap it to islands, and now you need to search for forests.
No, because it searches for Rimewood Falls. So no matter what, it will find me a forest and an island if I need it to.
For 2 mana.
Yeah, this is 3 mana. That's way worse. The difference between 2 and 3 mana is insane. But anyways, back to reality, as the kids say. Yeah, we have to tutor.
Right, let's hit it.
For Mystic Sanctuary, which is obnoxious, and it is Mystic Sanctuary. Do we play Reclaim? No.
We do not play Reclaim in this deck.
So we have 0 ways to get it back if there is land destruction, which, to be fair, there is not much of. But
correct.
Theoretically, if this were to get milled by someone just randomly, or blown up, or discarded from our hand, we are in big trouble if Mystic Sanctuary goes.
Yeah, I mean, we are being able to find Mystic Sanctuary with a few different cards in the list, though, right? Like, we do have the
Yeah,
Farseek,
we have a good number of tutors
specifically,
for it.
yeah, Lorien Revealed and things of that nature, right? So we actively are doing it. Crop Rotation is a fantastic card, right? So if we really wanted to go there, right, and we compare that, like, the Tribe Scout and these put lanes into play with a Tidal Bore combo, which actively means we need Mystic Sanctuary. So let's compare how many cards in the deck actively get us Mystic Sanctuary, right? Because that might be a bit of a better comparison.
Yeah, so it's hard to draw the comparisons. I'd say so the problem with drawing the comparison is for Gretchen to combo, we need 1 of 13 land untappers, 1 of 10 land enchantments, and 1 of 3 untappers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Generally. Obviously, there's some leeway as to what we need or don't need. We might need more, or we might need less. But we need 3 cards, of which we have, at minimum, 3 copies of, and a lot of redundancy. Actually, more copies of, because we have tutors for the untappers. So the fewest copies, if we're counting tutors as copies, in the deck for a piece is what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Minimum 7 copies of a combo piece in Gretchen. And yeah, let's take a look at Tatio. We have how many ways plus the Mystic Sanctuary for Mystic Sanctuary?
For Mystic Sanctuary total. So we also do play Expedition Map in this deck for the record.
I
because
saw.
we need it. So
1,
2. So here's something before we even start doing the counting. We have the hoops that we need to jump through with this deck, right? So we have the modal mixture to go tutor for the tutor to go tutor for the other card, right? So we could effectively muddle for Merchant Scroll for Dizzy Spell for Crop Rotation. You know what I mean? So we could do the
you gotta
jump
go
through the hoop,
hoops,
right? Like, so those lines are possible. Now, something I do want to make a statement of, which we've said this, and we actually said this in the tier list video, was this deck is a deck of its era, right? So back in the day, you could actually do that. You could be like, I'm going to tutor for this card, and then I'm going to take this card and tutor for this card, but you are also going to like turn like 15, turn like 17. Like, now with games ending average turn 8, that line is, in my opinion, it's just not as feasible anymore. What are your thoughts on that? You see where I'm getting at?
I don't know where average turns are sitting at. I think it's still closer to 9 or 10. I don't think it's
It was
quite
like
an
8. It was 8.7. I rounded down. I should have said 9, so that was my fault.
But yeah, still, like, games used to take a lot longer than they do now. So yeah, but I'm seeing like 5 or 6 ways to tutor the Mystic Sanctuary, which there's 1 copy of. And then we also need to find our single copy of Tidal Bore, which there's no replacement for. So that's 2 combo pieces that there is no replacement for in the deck. And there's multiple ways to tutor it, to be fair. But
yes.
You are in deep trouble if you lose any of these pieces at any point. So Grave Hate can be really rough for you. Just general interaction can really screw you over. But
I mean, Fairy Macabre exists.
Yeah, typically that's not going to be a problem for Tatiova if it's getting to the point that it's going for these combo lines, because that means you've already established your 5 mana commander and likely untapped. So you have at least 5, 6 mana, however much, and this deck does play a lot of interaction in the form of counter spells. So we can protect our win attempt if we get that far very, very well. And I do respect that about this deck.
Yep.
Not to mention
Agreed,
the line
agreed.
is already difficult to interact with if Tatyova gets to that point. Like, you might as well be dead.
Mhm. So something I would like to use as a comparison, which a lot of people have brought this up, um, which once again I don't think it's a fair comparison, but specifically how these decks fare 1v1 versus an aggro deck. And I think you guys already know how we feel about aggro decks at this point. But let's just use Gut, right? Let's just use Gut Leader, for example. That was the first one that came to my brain. So, historically, Tatyova, what do you think?
So, the decks actually have completely different game plans in a 1v1 versus Gut, in my opinion. Tatyova in a 1v1 against Gut, because your commander costs 5 mana, and your commander is also a required piece for your combo, and your 2 1-of cards that you have to tutor for, you have to find a way to balance making sure Gut doesn't hit the table or stick for a combat phase. So you have to deal with Gut every time it comes down, and still find a way to ramp up. So you're going to be really delayed in actually casting your ramp spells because you have to hold up the interaction to deal with Gut every time it comes down. Um,
Yep.
but if
See,
you
and that's
can get there, I think this deck probably beats Gut, just in the late game because it has passive life gain and card draw. And if you get that value engine online, you're probably doing all right.
yeah, something that I know this deck in comparison to Gretchen struggles with a bit more is that you can't throw anything you have under the bus.
Right.
So
All your creatures
even
are required.
correct. So I know I've seen Gretchen time and time again be able to throw Gretchen and or other random pieces it has under the bus, due to its hand, right? And when it comes to Gut plays Thunderclap, Lightning Bolt, and all of these cards that effectively kill Tatyova. So it's just like you said, you need to handle the Gut, and you need to handle the Bolt, and you need to handle the Thunderclap, and you need I mean, it's just so long in the tooth. But when it comes to Gretchen, it's like, well, I need to bolt it and I need to thunderclap it if I'm trying to get rid of the Gretchen, right? So like Gretchen always, from what I've seen historically in these matches, has done better against decks like Gut.
So the nice thing for Gretchen against Gut is that Gretchen is actually trying to race Gut in a 1v1, which sounds really weird, but the goal essentially is to establish multiple land untappers and just block with Gretchen for as long as you can. Just throw Gretchen and something else under the bus repeatedly. Maybe interact a couple times, and then just kind of try to get there while taking as much damage as you can reasonably take, and just kind of win before Gut can actually kill you. Obviously, the hands can change that. We actually play Moment's Peace and Weather the Storm in Gretchen, so we have some game against aggro decks. We don't have the passive life gain that Tatyova does, but we have a 2-drop 0-4 that is really nice at patching up little bits of damage over the course of a game, and we don't care about throwing it under the bus.
Yeah. And I've seen that time and time again, kind of jumping off to a different aggro deck with Dargo specifically.
Yep.
I've seen you block Dargo just indefinitely. If Gretchen's out, it's getting thrown under the bus, which you cannot do with this deck. Now, other things I like about Tatia, but you kind of already said it, the passive life gain. I really like that about this card. And I really think it goes unsaid so much at this point that I think just it's almost forgotten.
Yeah, I mean, it matters more so now than it used to, for sure. Um, yeah, like decks that rely on just dealing damage are in an awkward position where it's like you just can't let Tatiova exist because if Tatiova manages to exist that long, it's probably going to be trouble with you because they do play a good amount of interaction and they do have passive life gain. And it looks like we are actually on Moment's Peace in this deck.
This deck is on Moment Space.
Not Weather the Storm, but we are on Moment's Peace. So we are respecting aggro, which is nice.
A little bit. A little bit. A little bit. Tiny bit.
Yeah, we've got ways to tutor it. But yeah, still. Like, it's got some game, but it is noticeably slower than Gretchen. I will say that.
Yes, by far. And once again, the comparison, like I said earlier, was Abdel versus Tatiova. Because I think both of these decks are susceptible in the early game. And they're slower, but kind of when they get their engines online, they are much more difficult to stop. Because now they're able to, just like you said before, Tatiova is very good at protecting what it's able to do. But the problem is being able to establish that board state, similar to Abdel, which I believe Gretchen is much better at. Just here's a 1-2, here's a 0-4. Like, don't attack me, I'll just chump you. Look, they're available over there to get hit. Go hit them, right? And I'm not even saying that because I think that'll happen. I'm saying that because I've seen that happen. I saw that in the finals of Richest Rags when Bobby B. Fine won that event. When Tatio was getting pulverized and he just had blockers up, right? And
Tatiova just doesn't have cheap creatures, and the ones that it does are all 1/1 combo pieces that have to exist because you're not reasonably going to find more than 2 in a game.
Exactly. So you have to make sure that you protect them. And I don't know, I think that's a strike against Tatiova, and I think it's a plus for Gretchen, right? And, continuing just overall, I mean, I just think Gretchen here is just kind of leagues above Tatiova. Is it not? Am I blind? What am I missing here?
Yeah, I mean, in the current meta, I think it is a fair bit better than Tatiova. I think Tatiova is probably a bit better in more controlling metas, just because it's playing a lot of passive land ramp, and it doesn't need those creatures, right? Whereas Gretchen does. Gretchen still gets away with some land ramp and some of that, but not to the extent that Tatiova does. So Tatiova preys on much slower metas, whereas Gretchen does a lot better in the faster metas, just in general.
Yeah, I could definitely agree to that. But once again, with timers and things like that, with all these tournaments that we have going on and whatnot, like we are taking in consideration, time frame and things of that nature. These aren't the days of old, with Armix and everything like that running around,
Yeah. Anything else you want to say, or are you good to move on to our last little note?
I think my last thing I want to say is that if we could solidify kind of what we said here with what we've started to say, I mean, yeah, Gretchen is ahead, in my opinion. What do you got?
Yeah, me too. But let's move on to an example of a combo deck that's not quite there yet.
Not quite there.
That's how I'm starting.
Bad?
No, I don't think this deck is bad. But I do think that
All right.
Teshar is not quite there yet.
Okay.
So for anyone who doesn't know Teshar, This is a mono white commander that says whenever you cast a historic spell, which in our format is effectively whenever you cast an artifact spell, return target creature with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So he just reanimates creatures, um, which is pretty good. Like, that's just obviously a powerful effect, right? Um, so this deck has a couple of hoops to jump through to actually combo off. One, we need a sack enabler. We need something that allows us to sack our creatures. Of
Which
which,
is quite difficult in white.
yeah, in mono white, this is obnoxious. We have 6
Yep.
sack enablers. 2 of them suck, but we have to play them.
All right, he went there. He went there. I
Yeah,
just
so
needed that laugh. Okay, continue.
2 of these sack outlets cost mana, which is just awful for trying to combo. But they are good still because we can combo with them, as much as it sucks. But more often than not, they allow us to get value out of our commander by just having cards in the graveyard to reanimate over and over again. Even though it's not combo, they just improve our grind game. 2 of these sack outlets only sacrifice artifacts and don't give us any benefit, which also sucks. But once again, we just don't have the redundancy in this deck, which makes it really difficult. We
Well,
have.
so
Oh, go ahead.
specifically, let me kind of like you've said sucks a lot here. So let me give them something they could be a little happy about here real quick. So speaking about what Puzzles here, my man is talking about is the redundancy factor, right? He literally said that this deck doesn't have a lot of redundancy because it's one, it's newer, right? So it kind of has that going against it. And well, to start, Wizards has been doing a good job giving us a lot of new pieces and key pieces we've been missing in the format. So thank you, Wizards. Keep doing what you're doing. But to change the word from yeah, these suck to damn, these are nuts. I want to bring up 2 pieces and don't hate me for stealing your thunder.
I'll go for it.
But Standard Bearer and Suture Priest. Essentially, this is the only deck in format that makes these 2 creatures immortal, right? Like, can we say that?
Yeah, no, it's insane whenever this deck gets to do its thing with these cards.
Yeah. So Standard Bearer is just one of the most obnoxious creatures in the format. I think Gut is a very powerful deck with Standard Bearer. I think Censor is a very powerful deck with Standard Bearer. I think Abdel is a very powerful deck with Standard Bearer. But this deck with Standard Bearer is disgusting. It's like, oh, you killed it. Good job. All right, I'm going to target that. Well, hang on. I have priority now. Cast something, trigger on the stack, and people are like, no. And
yeah.
it's just disgusting. Similar to these blink strategies with Suture Priest. Now, I want to kind of go back to the second part. You can't ever find these cards. You just have to hope to draw them.
Yeah, so
And
in some
good luck.
matchups, you just roll again for these cards because they auto win the game.
Yes.
You know, against Abdel, I will mulligan for Suture Priest. Unfortunately, this deck doesn't mulligan very well. So it's tough to go past 5 or 6 because our combo requires so many cards. And our card quality is really not good. We're playing mono white, which struggles a bit in card quality. Some of the cards, well, I shouldn't say that. A lot of white cards have good card quality, but a majority of our deck is colorless because we need artifacts. Yes. So we're playing like Lotus Petal, Ornithopter, you know, a bunch of these 0-cost artifacts that
Yeah,
just
which are
don't
tough.
do anything on their own at all. Um, Now, obviously, when Teshar is in play, and every single one of these reads on cast, reanimate a 3 or less mana value creature from your graveyard. That's insane. So that's
Yep.
another thing. This deck is super reliant on the commander. Um, and
But
yeah,
you kind of already said it though, right? The consistency factor is not there, right? You cannot mulligan well with this deck, which our other decks that we've spoken about, like you could mulligan to Oblivion and beyond and still present win consistently. You cannot do this with this deck. Now, this is a bit unfair of a comparison, right? Because this, like I said already, it's a new deck, right? I do think this deck has legs. But another huge strike against this deck, which I think you could elaborate very well on this, is how many times do you have win and it takes an entire Discord server to figure out that you could win the game?
yeah. I mean, I don't think that's a problem with the deck necessarily, but it is true. This deck is extremely complicated. If we look here at the top, I have one of the most complicated combo decks in competitive Pauper Commander. That is the tagline of this deck. Um,
Nice,
you
nice.
have to dedicate a lot of time to learning the combo lines in this deck, and they are difficult to figure out. And in some game states, it's just insane, especially if you're trying to play around Grave Hate, which is so bad for this deck to play around. Um, it gets really rough in some scenarios. And to be fair, you can play around Grave Hate. Like, this deck has lines to do it. But
Yep.
wow, you really have to know this deck inside and out and understand every single interaction for that to work.
Yep.
It's the skill floor and skill ceiling are both extremely high on this deck. Card quality is low. We don't have very much interaction. It doesn't mulligan well right now. Um,
Well, it's kind of like what you said though, the interaction, right? It's hard to even stop an opponent from winning the game. So you're kind of like, well, hope you can't beat me before I beat you, but it's very difficult to do in a deck like this.
yeah, so this deck is just kind of the combo deck that sits there and just puts a value engine on the table, or tries to, and then just kind of grinds it out. And similar to Tatiova, this deck is extremely good in the late game. Once we've drawn 30 cards, the odds of us finding Kami of False Hope, or Standard Bearer, or Suture Priest, or Auriok Replica are very high. And then we can just kind
Oh,
of lock certain opponents out of the game, right?
is what you're saying? The comparison is this and Tatiova? Got it.
I am not
Understood.
comparing this deck. This deck is not on Tatiova level either. So yeah, this deck is just
uh,
like, it's such a weird combo deck because the ceiling of power level on this deck is absurdly high. But the floor is also absurdly low.
well,
Currently.
it's similar because you have these stickers, right? And these stickers are hope I get the right ones, right? Kind of aspect. And if I do, wow, I'm in the driver's seat. Well, driver's seat, I think, for lack of a better word, but you know, at least in the passenger seat, realistically. But what do the stickers really allow you to do? They also allow different infinites, right?
Yeah, so 3 of these stickers that we have access to actually replace certain pieces of our combo. So we've got one that says sacrifice this permanent, draw 2 cards. Boom. We have a sack outlet for free, and it draws us cards. That sticker is insane. Um,
Yep.
we've got one that's whenever this permanent dies, return target creature to its owner's hand. That's a retriever effect for us. And there's another sticker that is when this permanent dies, return a non-creature, non-land card from your graveyard to hand. That can get us artifacts back to hand. So both of those are replacements for retriever combos. A couple of the stickers are just outlets for combo, and a couple of them are just value cards. Um, if we have to, because you get 3 of the 10 at random, so you're not guaranteed to get a combo piece out of here. But the odds are okay that you get at least one.
Well, it kind of sounds like this deck is like, I hate to say it like this, but scraping at the bottom of the barrel, right? It's kind of getting whatever it can get from the format as a whole right now, instead of getting what it wants to get. Similar to like Abdel, right? There are so many blink spells in the format as a whole that we get to pick and choose the best ones, right? Just like Gretchen, you get to pick and choose your best auras because you just have so many. This deck doesn't have that opportunity. That's why it's not as consistent as
So
those.
it does in some aspects, and in others it doesn't. So like
Mm.
in our zero cost artifact suite, we have plenty of choices. But in our sacrifice outlet suite, we are just playing all of them because there are only 6 in mono white. And
Yep.
like I've said before, a lot of them not great, but good enough that we have to work with it.
Yep.
And like this deck can win at instant speed, but in order to
Yeah.
do that, we have to
Very
play some very bad cards.
good.
And so
Which the others do not.
yeah, like
So
this deck is very much a Teshar deck, whereas Abdel is a blue-white flicker deck. You know, Gretchen
yep.
is a Simic freed from the real deck. Tatiova is a Tatiova deck, but it's also just a Simic good stuff like Simic Landfall deck. But
Oh,
it
yeah.
still relies on Tatiova a decent bit, so it's still like a Tatiova deck, you know.
Oh yeah,
And
definitely.
this is a Teshar deck. This deck does not do very much without Teshar.
Well, I mean, with that, I think we really hammered home part of the issues like a deck like Teshar really brings to the format, right? In comparison to the others, to where the flaws that Teshar has are,
And
you
we
know,
don't get tutors! We have like 2 tutors
yeah,
in this deck.
yep, they're very out in the open, right? And it's just, it's a little bit of the feel bads, but when you're comparing this to the other decks, it's just there's no real comparison, right? This deck is good, but no comparison to the others, right?
Yeah, like, it's fine. It's amazing when it gets to do its thing, but the floor is also just so much lower than all the other decks here. And
Yep.
it's still solid. Like, the deck does great against aggro because you get to use their attackers as a free sack outlet, which is really cool.
Yep.
It can play into combo pods, assuming other people have interaction for the combo deck, and then you just kind of win after them. So that's really fun. But sometimes you just don't draw the cards you need, and you can't really tutor for them, and you don't have that much card advantage in the deck. So, yeah, it's lacking a lot of that consistency, and like we've said, a lot of the redundancy is also missing for this deck.
But as time goes on, hopefully we get more and more
Yeah,
for this deck.
please downshift some more sacrifice outlets, or like Altar of the Brood would be really cool, Watsy. No way we ever get that at common.
That is a ask.
But anyways, any closing comments from you?
You know what? I don't have anything. I think we pretty much hammered it all home, my bro. Take us home.
Alrighty, thank you guys for tuning in today. If you have any thoughts on this episode, make sure to leave them in the comments down below. Or you can find us on Twitter at Common Theory GP. Or you can email us at commontheorycpdh@gmail.com. Or you can find either of us on the Discords and many of the PDH servers. Find us anywhere, contact us, let us know your thoughts. Let us know if you have anything that you want us to talk about in the future. Any content we can steal from you guys. And make sure to leave a like down below. Subscribe if you aren't already. And I hope you all have a great day.